Probably the biggest thing I think we can all agree that we've seen during these recent weeks with the COVID outbreak is fear, stress, feeling overwhelmed, and especially when we are in positions where we have to positively influence other people. Those things can pose a real challenge for us, right? I mean, when we're scared and uncertain and things are changing very quickly, how is it that we can show up to be supportive and encouraging to the people that we're leading, and even to move forward with our business, with our company, rather than just everybody throw up our hands and just give up right now? So step one in kind of supporting all of us and becoming the best version of ourselves, even at this time, is going to be just some brain basics, okay? Understanding where fear comes from, what's happening inside our heads. There's a great author, I'll flash you one of his books, Mindsight. Dan Siegel is the author. Check it out if you can. If you have some time to do some extra reading, grab that book. You're gonna love it. The subtitle is The New Science of Personal Transformation. So that's why I loved it. And I was drawn to it. But he talks about how important it is that you and I understand the inside of our heads, what's happening inside our brains, so that we can begin to actually exercise some control. Because without knowing that, we really are at a disadvantage. So he teaches a hand model for the brain. He describes it in the book. He's on YouTube as well. He's going to do it better than I do. But the three main parts that we're going to talk about today, number one is the brain stem. So if you can imagine, this is like the person's forehead here. Brain stem, this is our like limbic area, amygdala, where a lot of powerful emotions come from. And then the hand, the fingers are like this cerebral cortex. Sometimes researchers and scientists will call it the neocortex. But that's the most powerful part of our brain. Those are the areas that are very uniquely human for us. And those are the areas from which you and I can modify the other areas of our brain to change our habits, to change our thoughts, our feelings, and actions as we move forward. So I want to show you what this looks like. I'm going to draw up here for you a kind of a cross section of this from looking at somebody's head from like behind. Okay, so this is where if you've got a pen, a piece of paper, you can draw along with me. I'll try to use some different colors. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. I am a little bit in the dark here because noticed when I turn on the lights, it glares off this beautiful whiteboard and you can hardly see a thing. So bear with me, check this out. First of all, we are gonna do, let's go with blue here. We're gonna do brain stem, okay? Again, this is from like behind. So if you can imagine, this is like spinal cord up into this little piece in our brain. So what is cool about this is the area of the brain where we are dealing with automatic type of reactions. So I'll give you a couple of examples after we go through the whole brain, but these are like just immediate reactions. So we share this piece of the brain with reptiles. So you can imagine, they're just always hanging out. They're not really doing much. They kind of sit still. They don't move unless they have to. But when they have to move, they move very quickly. They don't think about it. It's just a reaction. We have that same area of our brain as well. Right there, brain stem. Okay, so going up from there, I'm going to go with let's go with green. Just imagine another kind of layer of the brain. And I am going to, instead of straight lines, I'm going to put in this like kind of zigzaggy, still pretty rigid, but has like a zigzag to it. This is our emotional center of our brain, limbic area. So this is where like stress is coming from. This is where fear, along with that brainstem, work together to create fears. And again, we'll give some examples in just a moment. And then outside of that, I'm going to use red. We have this super awesome area of our brain. And I'm going to use like a wavy line to fill it in, because it's a very, very flexible area of our brain. So I'll give an example this way of how they all work together. And I'm going to use a lemon as an example. And go back to when I was a kid. So imagine that I never actually tasted a lemon as a fruit before. Of course, I had lemonade and I loved it. But imagine that my brother hands me a lemon. It's like, eat it. It's so good. It tastes like lemonade. And so I take it and I just take a big bite of it. Can you imagine? So my brain stem at that point, that little, at the top of the spinal column there, makes my face pucker up. Like, I didn't think about doing that, right? It's just like, ooh, just a reaction. Ugh, I didn't like that. Maybe I hold that lemon away from me. This all just instantaneous reaction based on that flavor. Now, at that point, I realized my brother's laughing at me, okay? And I should say this, Brian, if you see this video, I know this never happened. This is just an example. So at that point, let's say my brother's laughing at me, and he's like, ha, 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 you idiot, you ate that lemon, you're so dumb. Now, that green section on the whiteboard lights up for me, and I get mad, and I take that lemon and throw it at him as hard as I can. Okay, so I didn't really think very hard about that process. It was almost automatic, but it certainly wasn't an instantaneous reaction like it was when I tasted that sour fruit and like pulled it away. But it has to do with my relationship with him, right? He's my brother, and that area of the brain is very concerned with relationships. But that's also where we're getting lots of fear, lots of wild reactions to go out and get toilet paper, things like that with the COVID outbreak. So now we're going to move out to that very outer layer, the red section, to that cerebral cortex. And the most important part of that we're going to talk about in this group is the prefrontal cortex. That's the one that has the most power for us to modify all these other brain areas. So in the lemon example, this is the area of my brain that would say, hey, let's get that lemon. I think I know what it's missing. I think we can make lemonade out of that lemon if we just add a couple of other ingredients. I think we can do this. Let's try it. That's that prefrontal cortex that is forward thinking, future thinking, planning, executive functions. And so with this COVID outbreak, that's the area of our brains that start to say, hey, wait a second. I think there's an opportunity to maybe help other people. I think there's an opportunity here to do some good. I think while I'm home, there's a silver lining to some of this. Like, I can make sure I get my workouts in, I can control my food better, and man, I have a little bit of extra time. I'm going to use it for something that I've always wanted to do, and I want to read this book, right? So that's just a brief little synopsis of these different brain shapes, okay? And I want to show you these two main ones. I'll show you from the side here, okay? So side view, this is going to be the worst picture of the day, and we're almost done, so hang in there. We're going to do... Okay, this guy's smiling. Maybe it's kind of a creepy smile. Here's his eyeball, okay? So on his head, what we're talking about is prefrontal cortex, right about there, and then that limbic area deeper in, okay? So what you can't really say, you can kind of see that, okay. So what's important to know is that neither one is maybe better than the other, but they're supposed to work together all the time. But what's happened, and we're going to get into this in future videos, is as a culture, there's becoming a very noticeable disconnection between those brain parts. So we see people that are just like uncontrollable fear and just doing everything they can and staying in this state of elevated fear for so long. And the problem is sometimes making really bad selfish decisions that hurt, for example, other people, etc. So I know that you know what I'm talking about with that. But as leaders, for our own resilience and for that of our teams and the groups that we work with, our families, we have to make sure that we're keeping those both connected, and most importantly, we're keeping that prefrontal cortex online. So I know in the days to come, as even with Sarah, we talked about, hey, let's share ideas of how we can deal with stress, stay calm in challenging situations, etc. And it's all going to be about getting that prefrontal cortex activated as much as possible. So one way that you can do that is by getting your workout in. So Kim, nice. All right, cool. Here, I want to say this too. Every area of the brain is flexible. We can change it. We can change our reaction. Just to give you an example of that with COVID-19, last month, if someone coughed around you, you were probably like, no big deal, right? But now, because of the things that you've been learning and the thoughts and feelings you have about coughing, now if you're out in public for some reason and someone around you happens to cough, right, we have this instant reaction. We might pull away, or we might look at them like, what are you doing out in public? Like, we have an instantaneous response that we can't even control. So what's happened is we have edited that very central area of the brain there to have a new response. And we can constantly do that as we're creating these kind of vertical connections between these different areas of the brain. So my challenge for you after this, you think like, okay, great, cool. Now I understand all this. Maybe it was a review for you. What do I do with it, right? How do I use it? What's the point of knowing all this stuff? Here's the point. You can begin to take control of what's going on inside your head. If you can control thoughts, you can control feelings, you can control actions. And we need to do that as resilient leaders more than ever, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do, and you can do this privately, you don't need to put anything in the group about it, is start to notice in the next day or so when these areas of your brain are kind of taking over, okay? Start to notice when you start to feel fear, start to notice when you feel stressed or overwhelmed or confused or scared due to change. And just find a place where you can maybe just make a tally. That's all. That's all that I would ask you to do, is develop some extra awareness about these areas of your brain. And then, as I mentioned, we are going to be working very hard on activating that most powerful part of our brain up in the forehead there, the prefrontal cortex, so that we can edit the other areas of our brain. We absolutely can do it.